Hello, gentle readers. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So, I just watched Bridgerton Season 3, Part 1. Let's talk about it. Guys, real television is back. Real TV is back. Oh my goodness, I am genuinely so excited. I'm so thrilled to be sitting here today to film this review because listen, 2024 has been rough. Okay, 2024 has not been giving, has not been doing what needs to be done, at least until now, because we have the third season, or rather the first part of the third season of Bridgerton, one of my favorite shows. One of my very favorite shows to come out, to be birthed by this streaming era. So listen, we're not even going to dilly-dally. We're not even going to waste any time. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the first half of season 3 of Bridgerton. So if that sounds good to you, then be sure to keep watching. And also, if you enjoy my reviews, or if you enjoy this one in particular, then be sure to give it a thumbs up. And as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next, including my review of season 3 overall when the second half of the season drops. And let me tell you, I have some words to say to Netflix, okay, when it comes to that little release strategy of theirs. So stay tuned for that rant. But until then, guys, let's get into this. So when it comes to the story of season 3 of Bridgerton, as is tradition on this show and with the books as well, we are focusing on a different Bridgerton this time around. Here we have Colin at the center of attention. Is he the third oldest son, I think Benjamin is second, right? I don't even know, listen, okay? But Colin is next, okay? And he is destined to explore a romance with none other than Miss Whistledown herself, Miss Penelope Featherington, the icon, the legend, the moment. Now, this season continues on the drama from season 2, where we saw Penelope's secret identity as Lady Whistledown herself be revealed to her bestie Eloise after she had written some horrific things about her that almost got her shunned from society overall. And as a result of this, Eloise and Penelope's friendship is on the rocks at the moment, and it's honestly so heartbreaking. We hate to see it, but that unfortunately continues on into season 3, where they're not getting along, even though there are moments where it's clear that they still care for each other and they are still good friends deep down. But understandably, Eloise is still really annoyed with Penelope at the moment, and so the besties aren't back together quite yet. But Lady Whistledown's identity is still a mystery to the rest of the ton, and so Penelope continues on writing. She continues on doing her thing, and little do they know that it's Penelope herself, the wallflower, who is gossiping about them. But this season it gets juicy because we see Penelope be ensnared by her own net as she gets into some drama herself, because it's the third season that she has been out in society, and unfortunately she hasn't found a husband yet, despite the fact that her mother has made it a priority for all of her girls to get married. But it seems as though her mother has kind of given up on Penelope and has basically determined her fate as a spinster who is doomed to take care of her into old age. And Penelope is desperate to get out of her mother and her family's clutches, so she has decided to make it her mission to get married this season. She said, no more. I am going to do this season if it kills me. But fortunately for Penelope, Colin, her other Bridgerton bestie, is back from his global travels. Colin has officially returned from his gap year, okay? He is back and he has a whole new aura. He has a whole new lease on life. It seems like the men of the ton want to be be him and the women want to be with him. Like, he has become the most eligible bachelor of the ton this season. But because he's such a great friend, okay, because he's such a great bestie, he decides to make some time for Penelope to teach her the ways of flirtation, to teach her a romance, just to teach her, just to show her how it's done, I guess. Especially because he's feeling himself this season. He has a new hairstyle, he has a new wardrobe. He's been given the signature Bridgerton glow up because this is his season, and it's kind of like the character knows it. So he's feeling generous and decides to spread that aura, spread that swagger onto his best friend. Now, Penelope at first is a little cold towards Colin because lest we forget, okay, that this guy is a bit of a dickhead. Last season, she overheard him say some horrible things about her, like how he would never pursue her, he would never see Penelope in a romantic light. Well, more on that later. But she, of course, remembers this and was heartbroken by that revelation because she had feelings for him. But now that he's back and feeling generous enough to share his sexual magnetism, Penelope decides to take him up on the offer and get some lessons from him so that she can shoot her shot and get her man by the end of this season. And it works! Lo and behold, it actually works because she catches the attention of Lord Deblin. Lord Deblin is this naturalist. Ew, boo! He's this naturalist gross who likes nature and plants and animals or something. But he's a very particular personality, especially for the era and especially for this group of, listen, okay, the people in the ton are actually not serious people, but we'll get to that later on. But for the context of the show, Lord Deblin is the odd one out. And so in many ways, he is perfectly suited to Penelope because she is also somewhat of an odd one. She likes her books and he likes animals and doesn't like to eat them. And so like they're both not like the other girls. Like they're both so different, so cute, so unique. And so naturally they are drawn towards each other. And Penelope feels like he's the only man, well, almost the only man that she could be herself with, and he really appreciates that. He likes the fact that she has her own personality, has her own thing going on, although a bit too much because come to find out. Anyways, and so initially it seems like a really promising match, until there are complications along the way. But in the meantime, whilst we're exploring the main couple of the season, on the sidelines, we have some fun things going on as well, because this also happens to be the first season for yet another Bridgerton, this time Francesca. Francesca is a very interesting personality, which we'll get into later. And many book readers are super excited to see how her story turns out. I have not read the books, by the way, so this is all just like a surprise for me, and I'm really excited to find out myself. But yeah, Francesca is a very interesting personality, and she is experiencing her very first season out in society. And you contrast that against Eloise, who is in her second season at this point and seems no more eager to tie the knot with any of these fools. It's a very interesting dynamic to explore there. And then you also take a look at Penelope's family with the Featherington sisters, who are both hitched up. They've already tied the knot. They've already done what needed to be done, except now, because of their family's precarious financial circumstances, their mother is pushing them to have a male heir so that he can inherit the money and ensure that it stays within the family. And so that becomes a CDE plot line for the Featheringtons this season. But before we dive into the CDE plot lines, now that I've given you guys a summary of the story of season 3 part 1, it's time to dive into my thoughts. And overall, when it comes to the story itself, when it comes to the writing, the plotting, okay, I would say that it's good. It's good, but it's not great. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll explain myself. I'm not hating for the sake of hating, but so far, I think, Bridgerton's gonna Bridgerton. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So like, I'm always gonna have a smile on my face when it pops up. But story-wise, I think this is one of the weaker seasons so far. And to be honest, I'm not terribly surprised, because one of the biggest questions that I had going into season 3 of the show was, what were they gonna do about Colin? What are they gonna do about Colin? Because in my opinion, Colin was always going to be a tough pill to swallow as a male love interest. He was such a dickhead to Penelope last season. I genuinely wondered if there was any coming back from that, from what he said to his friends. I hated the fact that he had such a low view of her, and I know that this is part of the best friends to lovers trope, which we'll talk about in a second, but I still thought that it was a tough pill to swallow. Like I said, one of my biggest questions was, how are they going to redeem this character? Because after his performance in seasons 1 and 2, I was really unsure of how they were going to make me get invested in a love story between him and Penelope. And now, having seen the first half of the 3rd season, I would say they're almost there. They're almost there. Okay, they're almost there, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Guys, listen. Let's be serious. Let's be serious for a second here. Okay, we've had 2.5 main Bridgerton seasons, and not to mention the spin-off Queen Charlotte from last year. You want to talk about love stories? Ooh, you want to talk about love stories that that make you feel hot and woozy and make you twirl your hair and blush. Like, you want to talk about a love story. I'm so sorry, but like, Kate and Anthony and Charlotte and George are still here. They are still the ones to beat. I'm so sorry. Even after this first half of the 3rd season, like, their crowns remain untouched. They remain perfectly seated on their thrones. I'm still not yet seeing the same level of once in a lifetime love storyness that I got from those other two. Now listen, there's still time. I'm still holding out hope, but I don't think we're quite at that level. And I have to say, I think a major helper for the other two couples was one of the most iconic tropes of all time in enemies to lovers. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you've seen my review of Bridgerton season 2, then you know full well that I am a sucker for an enemies to lovers storyline, and so that those storylines were custom made for me. Those storylines were produced, curated for me to enjoy, and I ate it. I ate it. Whereas here we have a best friends to lovers storyline, and like, that's cute. I get like, it's cute, it's fine, but it doesn't have the same level of zest. It doesn't have the same level of passion as an enemies to lovers storyline. But listen, I completely understand that Colin and Penelope's relationship is different to that of Kate and Anthony, or even George and Charlotte. But even still, considering the fact that this is a different trope that we're exploring this time, I still think that there were slight weaknesses in the storytelling, namely the pacing of this story. The pacing of this love story somehow simultaneously felt too rushed and yet too slow. This story has a very odd pace to it, because there were times where I felt like I didn't get enough of that romantic chemistry from Penelope and Colin, and I didn't quite see how they were going to get to that end game, and I started to think like, oh, maybe they're going to have their first kiss at like the end of the season. Like, what's happening here? But then somewhere along the line, halfway through episode 2 to like episode 3, it just kind of raced ahead, and all of a sudden Colin was obsessed with Penelope, like he was thinking about her all day, all night in his dreams, and that just felt like quite a leap. So I do feel like the pacing was a little off on this love story, and also I did feel like there was a sense of forcefulness. Like it didn't feel as natural as we've seen in previous Bridgerton couples. It really felt like they were trying to force, you know, Colin into falling in love with Penelope, almost like he had drank a love potion and was in love with her all of a sudden. Speaking of popular fan fiction tropes, okay, maybe that's what they could have gone with, a love potion. That's a classic, that's a favorite, but that's how it felt like. It felt like that kiss that she begged him for, which by the way pissed me off to no end, but it felt like that kiss kind of acted as this love potion that kind of switched the lights on for him and made him fall in love with her. So it wasn't quite as organic, it wasn't quite as well paced as what we've seen previously. But all criticisms aside, I have to say, when we did finally get to the point where Colin was falling deeply, madly, disgustingly in love with Penelope, that's when I had the biggest smile on my face, because it's exactly what he deserves. After the shenanigans of the previous 2 seasons where he was just sidelining her, not even looking at her twice, for him to be sick, for him to be begging at her mercy, this is exactly what I wanted to see. This is the part that they absolutely nailed. I was very pleased with that. I was very satisfied. The fact that he was so jealous of Lord Devlin, like he was looking at him sick to death. Every ball that Penelope attended where she was dancing with Lord Devlin, or even just talking to him, literally even just breathing in the same vicinity as him, Colin was just sick. Like he was just throwing up with anger. Like it was hilarious to see. That is the part that they absolutely nailed, because it's exactly what Penelope deserves. Oh yes, it's exactly what she deserves, and it's exactly what he deserves, derogatory, after how he treated her. And that's one of the things that Bridgerton always gets right. They always get that drama, they always get that sensuality, that passion. Like, that's what always keeps me coming back, okay? Seeing these men just sick to death with love. That's what I love to see on this show, or this franchise rather, considering we also had that spin-off with George and Charlotte, and that was another level. That was another level of sick to death, okay? But that's what this show specializes in. Like, that's what this show understands. That's why shows like The Gilded Age could never, because they don't understand the sauce. They don't understand the spark, the spice that Bridgerton has. Now, ultimately, in the mid-season finale, we see Penelope and Colin finally get together in a carriage ride of a lifetime. The carriage ride of a lifetime, okay? Listen, I've seen many comments on Twitter analyzing every single frame of that scene, but all I'll say is, to keep it PG, all I'll say is that they did what needed to be done. Yeah, they did what needed to be done. The passion was there, the chemistry was there. Colin fixing her dress after with a couple of fingers, yeah, that was noted. But this show, like I said, this show completely understands its audience. It understands what needs to be done, and it delivers each and every time. So like, yeah. Now, we did get a preview of what's to come for the second half of season 3, and it looks like the big main issue, the elephant in the room, is Lady Whistledown, and the fact that Colin, you know, swore that he would get vengeance, or he would, you know, ruin her life somehow once he found out who Lady Whistledown was. This has been a mystery that's been in the backdrop of the series all throughout, with Queen Charlotte being on a rampage last season trying to figure out who this damn woman was, but ultimately the only person who was actually enlightened was Eloise, and it led to her friendship with Penelope breaking down. But perhaps at the end of season 3 we'll see everyone find out who Lady Whistledown is, or maybe just Colin, who unbeknownst to him is about to become Lord Whistledown. Like, unbeknownst to him, he's set to marry Lady Whistledown. So that should be exciting. Again, I wouldn't say this story is as spicy as the previous seasons, especially considering we've already explored the mystery of Lady Whistledown in previous seasons. So like, it's not really a new thing. If you compare it, and I know that we don't always want to compare everything, but just listen for a second. If you compare it to season 2, where we had so much drama surrounding the Sharma sisters, right? Like that love triangle, so much was going on there. Plus Anthony and his trauma, and you know, him being scared of bees. Like there was so much happening there that this story feels quite stripped down and simple and a little bit light, and so it really is being held up by the chemistry of the two actors. And luckily I think that Nicola and Luke are doing a splendid job. They're doing a splendid job selling the chemistry between the two characters. Now next up we have some of the side storylines, and like I said, this season is Francesca Bridgerton's very first season out in society, and she is a really interesting character. Francesca is kind of tough to figure out initially, especially as someone who hasn't read the books. I was trying to like suss this girl out because I couldn't quite understand. It felt like she was really trying to emulate her older sister Daphne. Like she was trying to be this perfect package of a potential wifey for society, but at the same time there were still parts of her personality and her interests and hobbies that still shone. Like she loves music, and she has a real passion for playing the pianoforte, and she does so very impressively, so much so that, you know, when the Queen overhears her playing, she immediately names her the diamond of the season, after being quite reluctant to name anyone as a diamond, considering the havoc and chaos that was caused in the previous season. So Francesca seems to have two sides to her, where on the one hand, she seems like the type to just kind of put her head down, follow the rules, follow the path laid out for all of these women in, you know, 19th century society, marry a wealthy man of good standing, you know, amongst the ton, get herself a nice title, pump out a couple of heirs, and then ultimately she'll turn into one of the mamas, pushing her own daughters into the same path that she had to follow. But on the other hand, it seems like Francesca is trying to break out from that path, or at the very least, if that is to be her destiny, then perhaps she could pursue a love match, which is actually what her mother wants for her. But she ends up meeting a Lord something. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten his name, but it's the black guy. I can't remember what he's called, and I tried looking it up, I can't find his name. But he is also a very interesting fellow. Like they seem to get on pretty well, but then there are times where he just up and leaves, and then he does something wonderful, like writes a whole, you know, song for her, kind of amending it based off of the song that they heard when they were out on their walk. And so there's something really interesting happening there. And to all of the book reader girlies, please don't spoil it. Please don't spoil it in the comments, but you know, there's definitely something happening in the periphery between Francesca and this Lord something, who unfortunately his name I can't remember, but he's actually not the guy that the Queen had in mind for her diamond, because she had Lord Samadani brought in from some place in Europe, and he seems to be all wrong for Francesca. He's a bit of a showboat, he likes attention, and she's more quiet and reserved, but it seems like a part of her, the first part that's happy to just go along with the flow, just wants to kind of put her head down and go along with what the Queen wants for her. But increasingly as the season goes on, we see her pursuing the other Lord, and so we'll see where she ends up. I mean, either way she's going to end up with a rich man. Like either way she's gonna end up with a rich man with a title, so like the stakes aren't the highest here across the board when it comes to this series, but like we're having fun. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Now next we have another side storyline from season 3 in the form of the Featherington sisters and their pursuit of a male heir. And this is just, honestly, it's just funny. Honestly, it's just banter. Like, I mean, the Featheringtons have always been a mad bunch. You have Lady Featherington, who has always been just wacky and weird and unapologetically wild. Okay, she's basically Kris Jenner. She's basically the Featherington sisters' Kris Jenner from the Regency era, and she's always been a riot. But in the past, they've kind of teetered on being annoying and far too mean towards Penelope, and so I haven't liked them as much. But this season, the writers have made a conscious effort to just make them hilarious. Like, they have literally had some of the funniest lines across the board, and it's been really enjoyable to watch their side storyline. Again, it is quite thin, like they're just looking to produce a male heir. It's not quite as complicated as last season where they had that distant cousin who came in and took their fortune and whatever. Everything has just kind of been flattened out and simplified, but because of the great chemistry of the cast and the great performances and the great line deliveries, I mean when Lady Featherington was talking to her daughters and trying to ask them like, yo, what's going on in the bedroom, like what's the update, and they clearly just have no sex education. And sex education, speaking of Netflix shows, they've had no sex education. They don't know what's going on. They could use a visit to Otis's office, okay? And there's that hilarious line where one of the sisters was like, stick it in. Another favourite line of mine was from Lady Featherington, where there was that random guy who wanted to show her the lamp. He was like, do you want to see this magical invention of a lamp? And she was just like, no. Now we also have some other side storylines, as is tradition for Bridgerton seasons, like for instance Eloise, who is trying to fill that massive friendship hole that she has in her heart after breaking up with Penelope, by befriending Cressida, who is a whole different personality, but perhaps they have more in common than you would think and they are able to get along. But despite the fact that Eloise has no real interest in actually pursuing a romantic relationship with any of the fools of the ton, Cressida is unfortunately being pushed by her family to get married ASAP, and so she also finds herself pursuing Lord Deblin and doing somersaults, doing cartwheels to get his attention, but it's all for nothing because he ultimately only has eyes for Penelope, and it seems like he's watching a bit too closely. Because even he is able to spot the glances, or rather the glares, that Colin is shooting his way during every single ball. And he basically calls it out and says, listen, I have plans for my life and how this marriage is gonna work. Okay, I'm gonna be leaving. As soon as we get married, I'm gonna be going for 3 years. I'm gonna be leaving you to the household. And I can't be sitting up in some rainforest in South America thinking like, is my wife sleeping with Colin Bridgerton? Like, I can't be kept awake from those thoughts all night, so I'm gonna back out from this because you two clearly have some unresolved issues. Now, we're also getting the beginnings of some other love stories, namely that between Violet Bridgerton and Lady Danbury's brother. What's going on there? And you also have Benedict pursuing something with this Lady Tilly. Listen, I'm looking forward to Benedict's season. I hope they really nail him down in terms of getting him to really fall in love with someone. Is it going to be Lady Tilly? No, don't tell me. Don't tell me if you read the books. But I'm just curious to see how they'll handle the character, because so far he's just been so awash. So like, he's just been all over the place. So like, I'm really curious to see how they're going to nail him down for his season. But listen guys, overall, we're still in this. We're still in the game. Okay, I can't wait to see how they wrap up season 3 of the show. So far, I am fully invested, particularly in Penelope and Colin's story. Yes, it's not as drama filled, it's not as intricate, and it's not quite as spicy, it's not quite as passionate as Kate and Anthony, but the bar is so high that like, I don't blame them too much. And they still have a chance to ride this one home with the second half. And in terms of the other storylines, like, I'm curious to see how they're wrapped up this season as well. But I mean, the B, C, D, E storylines are never the main draw, so like, the focus really isn't on them. But in terms of everything else, I mean, Bridgerton continues to deliver on all fronts. The hair, the makeup, the costuming. Ooh! I love the world of Bridgerton. I love the world that they have created here. I love the feeling. I love the vibe of it. It's just a joy to return to each and every year. And of course, because this season was centered on Colin and Penelope, we saw the two characters get the glow-ups of a lifetime. Penelope was looking stunning. The lace was laid. Did you see the baby hairs? Did you see? And the new dresses that she's wearing. Ooh, the first kind of new dress in her wardrobe, the deep emerald green one was so luscious and so gorgeous. I wish she wore more green on the show, but she has quickly transitioned to Bridgerton blue, which we all know. We all know what that means when the girlies start wearing Bridgerton blue. And then you have Colin as well. In comparison to his look from the first 2 seasons, they've toned down his hair. He's looking good. He's looking stylish. So yeah, once again, the Bridgerton creative team, hair, makeup, costuming team have absolutely nailed it. And I know that some of the fashion girlies on social media often complain that Bridgerton costumes aren't historically accurate, but like, that's not you don't go to Bridgerton for historical accuracy. Like, Bridgerton has curated a vibe. It's curated an aesthetic that is so pleasing to the eye. Okay, I don't know how you could be upset at the Bridgerton costumes unless you look too closely and you see that some of them aren't constructed as well as others, but whatever. Overall, I really love the look of this show. I love the world that they have created, and it's a joy to return to each and every year. But now that I have sung the praises of this show, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to wrap up this review on a sour note with a rant directed not to Shondaland, not to Chris Van Dusen, who's doing his damn job, but to Netflix.com. Netflix.com, I have a bone to pick with you, because what the actual hell? What the actual hell? Why has this 8-episode season been split into 2 parts? That is ridiculous. Netflix I'm sick and tired of Netflix's BS. Okay, I'm sick and tired of it, because there is no real reason why Bridgerton needs to be split up into 2 parts. Now, I actually can't say that I'm surprised by this. I should have seen it coming, really, because just last year I made a video diving into the different release strategies that streaming services have been exploring as of late, which you can check out on my channel. And one of the release strategies that I talked about was the hybrid model. And the hybrid model basically tries to take the advantages of both the weekly release strategy and the binge drop in order to basically maximize the advantage for that series, to continue on the conversation whilst at the same time getting in all of those watch hours whilst people check out the show over a weekend. Now, if you want to hear more of my breakdown of these release strategies, then check out that video. But like I said, I'm not surprised that Netflix is trying to do this, especially with its more popular series, but it still pisses me off. It still pisses me off. Like, oh, it's less annoying than a weekly drop, but I just don't think that Bridgerton, an 8-episode show, needed to be split up into 2 parts so that they can get an extra month of your subscription money. Like, it just pisses me off. Make no mistake, guys, I will be there. I will absolutely be seated on the 13th of June to watch the second half of season 3 of Bridgerton. But until then, that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Bridgerton season 3 part 1, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season so far down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.